Ultimately, it's about empowerment, this embodiment of our power as women and standing our ground and actually showing up for the beautiful, powerful, divine beings that we are.
Hello, and welcome to the Connect podcast. This show is all about helping you connect to your soul's calling so you can take action on it. Because the sweetest success is a blend of discovering your purpose with the inner drive to bring it to life. I'm Sheila, health coach, lifestyle entrepreneur, and mom of two, best known for my online wellness programs, mentoring, and self-love passion. Listen in for inspiring interviews, solo chats, and Q&A sessions that will move you past overwhelm towards what lights you up. Stop accepting good enough and go for your version of great in your health, business, and relationships. Let's get started. Welcome, everyone, to this interview of the Connect podcast. I'm so excited that we have our very first guest who came on with me for episode 4, Kim Ruwa. She's joining me now from Amsterdam. Kim, it is so awesome to see you again.
Yes, it absolutely is. Thank you for having me again. Wow. Time has passed quickly.
It really has. And this conversation today, I want to pick up where we left off. You were about to leave the tiny island in Cambodia for the mainland. And I'm not even sure of what the timing was on that, but I'd love to hear, where you went when you did get to the mainland, how long you stayed. And then I believe it was May of this year that you returned to Amsterdam, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us what you did.
So we arrived back in March 2020 on the islands, and we stayed for about 3 months. And my timelines are also a bit blurry because it's like, we were kind of living on a month-to-month basis, kind of seeing, okay, what's going to happen? Which country's going to open next? And we'll take it from there. But no countries opened up. So we ended up staying until May this year in Cambodia, to be honest. So from the islands, we went to a little city called Kampot, for anybody who's been there, which is a nice kind of like landing back into civilization kind of place, because it's not huge, but you do have, the luxuries of some more restaurants and some little shops and things, massages. And then we stayed there for about 3 months, I think. Then we went to the capital city, Phnom Penh. And in between, we did travel a bit back to Siem Reap, which is where the big temple complex is, Angkor Wat. But we ended up staying then for the rest of the time in Phnom Penh, to be honest. And we had an amazing time. Totally different from what we talked about back then, where I was like, we're going to visit 15 different countries and it's going to be amazing. And that all went into the water, basically. But we had a completely different experience of the country. And I'm so, so grateful for what it ended up being and for what all of it that it ended up giving us. So that's kind of a nutshell version.
Yeah, it is interesting how our plans can be laid out before us and then they can change. And that's something that I think almost everybody experienced in 2020. And it felt even more heightened for you and your partner because you had left your careers and you were really planning this jet-setting experience into some beautiful cultures. And you found yourself instead diving deeply into one particular culture, the Cambodian culture. And so I would love to know, what were some of the greatest lessons that come to mind when you think of the people of Cambodia, the people that you met while you were on the island and then on the mainland, that now are helping give a different idea of informing on your life that you never would have had?
That's a great question. The first thing that comes to mind is their kindness and the joy that just radiates from their being. I usually learn a language if I'm in a country for more than 6 months, but because we were, living on this, what country's going to open next kind of basis, I didn't start learning the language. So the contact that I had with the locals, unless they spoke English, of course, was was on the basis of smiles.
Mm.
And a few, like they always put their hands in prayer pose to kind of say thank you. So it was very basic, the communication that I had with them. And it was always, 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 not a single exception, very gentle, very kind, very joyful. And it just gives me, like, I noticed it very specifically when I came back to the Netherlands. I was like, whoa, where am I? People are so rushed and so rude and so like not grounded, or don't even know how to call it. And so I think that's one of the first things that come to mind, the kindness and the joy and just, the gentleness. Like there's people could be, really, really poor, having a very humble life, living in maybe like a small little house, and still be so, so kind and gentle. And then you have the billionaires on the other hand on the other side of the spectrum. But the people you would deal with on a day-to-day basis, buying your sugarcane juice or whatever it is that you were getting, they were just so gentle. Or, guard at the supermarket. Like I would always have like a little, well, not a chat, but a little interaction. And you just made friends. Like I would get out my Google Translate, or the lady I literally have like the sugarcane lady in my head. And she would show me pictures of her little daughter, and we would have like a small conversation. She would teach me a few words, which I'd forget instantly because it's such a different language. Mm-hmm. But I feel that kindness is kind of like the word birthright comes up for me. It's like a way of communicating with people. Like what stops us from just smiling to somebody, regardless of whether we know them or not, simply because they are a human being. So that I feel is definitely something that I take with me in my heart forever.
Oh, wow. I feel like if all of us could embody that, imagine what the world would look like.
Oh, God,
that kindness, that joy. It's the childlike quality, I think, that all of us had at one time, or most of us. I mean, there are some people who maybe had a very difficult childhood, so certainly want to keep that in mind. But I think about my life and the life of many people who I grew up with, that childhood innocence. Even I think of my own kids, and just quick to smile and be joyful and to play and be lighthearted. And we don't have to lose that. We can know, I believe, about the hard things in the world, but we still can reconnect into the joy that is there. It is that great dichotomy between the two that makes up life. And I think, like you say, many of us have lost that connection to joy because joy becomes disembodied. It becomes something that you have to go out and achieve based on, your status in life, and based on often unrealistic goals, or based on what somebody else wants. And so people might go striving, and then realize once they achieve something, actually, that didn't give me joy after all. Maybe it does, but maybe it doesn't. And so how come we can't strive and be joyful and live and be joyful? Like we should be able to do both. So I love that you are an example of that, because I notice just in following your journey, in the things that you share, the things you put out in the world, just your spirit is one of joy, and it's aspirational to see. And so I do hope that, it catches on even more.
Yes, please.
Oh.
Yeah, because it's like there are hardships in life that we go through at one or several points of our lives, yet it doesn't cost anything. Like everybody can access a smile and just a little interaction with somebody. Mm-hmm. And I think of that quite a lot, because it's one of those things that you don't know what the person in front of you is going through.
Right.
And maybe that one little smile can just give them that spark of light that changes their day. You just don't know. So yeah, of course, I'm grumpy sometimes as well. Yes, I admit. Yet on the overall, I am a very smiling, very joyful person. So thank you for saying that. That's a huge compliment.
It makes such a difference. And yes, we don't know what the person in front of us is experiencing. I had just this morning had a wonderfully deep conversation with my youngest son because in some of his curriculum, they were talking about depression in teenagers and what it can look like and the spectrum of like being really happy one moment and being really sad the next. And he says, "Well, Mom, does that mean that I'm depressed? Because that happens to me sometimes." I said, "Well, there's so much more that goes into that, but let's just say that this is human." And he's also the type of person who is more of an emotional person. He really is in touch with his emotions. And I said, the fact that you're asking about it, the fact that you're in the inquiry is a good sign because you communicate about how you're feeling. Um, and I said, that's why it's really great. He's also the type of person who is quick to spread joy and to make people laugh and smile. And so I said, hold on to that gift, but also know that, and I think he knows this from our many conversations, that it's okay to allow your feelings to float and to go to a sad place because there are things to be sad about as well. And sitting in that sadness, we can't just shove it away, but sitting in it will teach us things as well. And finding someone, a safe person to be able to go through that with and talk about how you're feeling, that's important too. So, yeah, there's so much to learn from our emotions and to not just push them away, but then to know, yes, something as simple as a little interaction of even asking someone how they're doing, that can open people right up and give them something that they may have needed that they didn't even know. And so when you were in Cambodia, I know you were doing a lot of different ceremonies. You were leaning on a lot of the tools of your trade that you have deepened into over the years. And one of the things that you were doing a lot of was cacao ceremonies. And I would love for you to share, first of all, what is cacao? What are the healing properties? And then what does a traditional cacao ceremony look like? Like, what is the purpose? What's the goal? And all of that.
Sure. Yeah, it was really actually an amazing story how cacao kind of came back into my life in Cambodia. So I'll start sharing a bit about that if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I first was introduced to cacao in Ireland when I was still living there. A good friend and colleague of mine was like, "Come on, Kim, I'm going to a cacao ceremony. Come along." And I had no idea what this was going to be about. Like, I knew it was going to be in a yoga studio and we'd have this hot chocolate, this hot cacao beverage, and it would take about 3 hours. So I was like, okay, well, I love experiencing new things. I will go along. And it was beautiful. This woman from Las Vegas that I still follow and still cherish everything that she does. She hosted the ceremony, and I had some very profound experiences actually, where my dad, who had passed away, came to me in the vision as we were laying down, as we had taken the cacao already. And little did I guess in that moment that I would be hosting cacao ceremony myself, of course. So it's very exciting. I went to a few more in Ireland afterwards, and I kind of picked it up as a habit, like a practice, I guess I would prefer that word for myself, like a daily practice to prepare my own cacao. And I'll explain in a minute why, what the benefits are, why this can be such a beautiful addition to your day. And I took some cacao with me, like the little piece of cacao that I had left as we were packing up boxes. I was like, okay, I'm going to take this with me. I didn't think about, well, oh, let me take another kilo of cacao. I'm like, well, I'm going to Asia. I'm sure there will be cacao somewhere. And so I had it in my bag for a couple of months until the islands, actually. And at that point in Thailand, I had gone to a few cacao ceremonies, and they were beautiful, really amazing, different cacao, different location, different position on the planet, which makes a difference as well in terms of the energies. And kind of time went by until the islands, and I started thinking, I'm like, oh, I miss cacao. Like, I don't have a kitchen. I can't really prepare it. I miss having this daily cup of goodness and this practice for myself. So I started to look and found some cacao in Thailand, it was very expensive just to ship it. So I was like, oh God, well, it doesn't look like I'm going to find any cacao. And then I came across an organic cacao farm. So I wrote them and I said, oh, can I order some beans or can I order some cacao? And they're like, yeah, sure. We'll ship you 60 kilos, which is a lot. I don't know what that is in it's like that, like 3 or 4 of those like huge coffee bags, the I don't know what they're called. And I was like, okay, well, let's not do that. That's not very handy. And I told a friend, and we were going to go into the mountains close to where the cacao farm is. And I kind of joked around because she was continuing the journey. I had to go back because I had client sessions and stuff. And she actually brought me back some cacao, some beans, back to the capital city, or to Cambodia. I think we were still there. And in that same week, one of the girls that hosted a ceremony in Thailand launched her cacao facilitation training. I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Yeah, this sounds good. Going to sign up. And then the third synchronicity in that week was that a Colombian lady was hosting a ceremony in which she would teach us how to roast, how to peel, and how to grind beans. So it was all kind of like a very magical get together in which the spirit of cacao, I'm sure, brought herself onto my path in a very clear way that I couldn't even ever have imagined. Like literally, this was a small town, and to find a cacao ceremony, first of all, and then to learn about the whole process was just amazing.
Wow.
And so I jumped on the cacao train, essentially, to really learn and deep dive. And so let me tell you a bit about cacao and what it is. I could sit here for a couple of hours, by the way, so do pause me when you feel like, oh, that's enough information. So cacao is a plant medicine, if we were to call it in its most simple form. It's a plant and it's a medicine. It used to be, well, it still is being used by ancient tribes like the Aztecs, the Mayans, kind of like Central, Southern America.
Mm-hmm.
That's where these plants grow, about 20% above the equator, 20% below. That's kind of the ideal strip of climate for cacao trees to thrive. And they call it the food of the gods because for them, it was a connection with the unseen, with the spirit of cacao. And if you dive into other plant medicines, you'll always see, well, just like a chamomile or a pepper or cinnamon, they're all plant spirits, essentially, even though when we're brewing something up in our kitchen, we may not tap into that spiritual element of these plants. Or just like essential oils, if you really go into medicinal essential oils, you'll also learn about, it's more than just a physical plant. There's actually an unseen element connected to it, just like with cacao. And so its benefits are ginormous. From a physical level, I call it like a spiritual superfood. On a spiritual level, it gives you lots of, like it's one of the highest in antioxidants plants globally. It gives you all kinds of goodies like magnesium and zinc and you name it. There's like a whole wash list of all kinds of good substances that it contains that are good for the heart, good for the body, very detoxifying. So it really helps you on a physical level, and that it's a medicine. It can support you to work with all kinds of physical ailments that you may have. And then what it does, it opens the heart. It's very much called a heart medicine. It's very gentle. It's a non-psychedelic plant, which I think is important to mention as well, because sometimes people come to me like, oh, I'm a little bit afraid, like what can happen? Because we do tap into this, or we can tap into this unseen spiritual element of ourselves as well. So it opens the heart. Everything starts kind of flowing more. It's very energizing. It does have a caffeine-like substance, which gives us energy in a much more gentle kind of like sustained way than coffee, for example. Coffee spikes very much and it can be very kind of like intense for people.
Right.
So
it is for me. And coffee. Oh boy, you want to get something done? Give me some coffee. Oh my goodness. But I won't be sleeping.
Exactly. So cacao can have that effect on people as well if you do ceremonies at night, for example,
Mm.
that it may give you, well, it energizes you. So you may not sleep immediately after, for example. And so on an emotional level, it can really help you open up and release, whether it's trauma, whether it's any of the emotions like we were just talking about. It can be grief, it can be sadness, it can be hurt, it can be so many different things.
Mm.
Mentally, it can give you clarity. And on a spiritual level, I see it as a really like huge connector with our intuition, with our higher self, and with a huge range of other spirits or beings or ancestors or past loved ones, like you name it, anything is possible. And I've experienced so many ceremonies now myself. Every single time is different, and every single time you get what you need. The medicine is so powerful in knowing that what you need that day, what you can handle, is what you will receive, which I find just so beautiful. It's like a gift, a gift in a little cacao bean. Oh, and actually, one more thing that people might not know, it's not cacao powder as you would buy it, for example, at a health store. It's actually the bean roasted, peeled, and then ground up traditionally with a big, like stone kind of grinder. Now, if it's on a mass scale, yeah, there may be some equipment used, but traditionally it's all done by hand. And I used to do this. Well, I did this in Cambodia for 6 months, 8 months, I don't even know exactly. And it gave me such a strong connection with the bean, with the plant, because it's different than opening up a package of ceremonial cacao, which is made just as beautifully and just as intentionally. However, it's always going to be different, I feel, when you dry your own chamomile flowers and make your own tea or your own rose balm or you name it. It's going to be different because you actually, with your own hands, you have been able to put intention to every part of the process. And so I'm so blessed that the plant came onto my path in Cambodia.
Oh, it's amazing. And it tastes so good too, right? It really satisfies. There's that satisfaction of your taste buds as well that kind of makes it full circle, like it's a full body experience. And I love that idea of pouring yourself into the preparation of the cacao. And it's like I say very much with healthy eating, like when you really are putting love into a meal, it does impact the energy of that meal. When you're preparing it, we instead of just eating disconnected and rushed, it's not going to have the same energetic impact on your body, even if it's healthy food. Like we have, again, something else we've lost touch with, right? The things that for so many, many generations, people were fully involved with preparing what they ingested. And the miracle that these plants grow to nourish us, and they have different properties to help our health. And so many people have never been to a farm or seen really a plant harvested. So there's that disconnect that hopefully people are coming back in touch with as they're seeing more like farmers markets and, different kinds of ways of bringing food to people that are more natural. But this is, like you say, on an even more spiritual level. And I mean, it's interesting because you talk about cacao beans, and I think a lot of people listening who are coffee lovers, they love their coffee, they can feel a spiritual connection to their daily cup of coffee, and they notice when they don't have it. It's powerful. Food is so powerful, and it sets off all of these chemical cascades in our body. And it's amazing to know that we have access to so many different things that can give us a positive cascade in our body. And so I think it's beautiful that you were able to be at that place, at the source, really getting to know how to process it and prepare it, and then also offer it up. And you were doing ceremonies in person, but you were also doing online ceremonies. So you were utilizing the beautiful technology of Zoom to be able to reach other
Yeah.
people with this. And so what are some of the things that people you have done ceremonies with have come forward with? Like, have they shared with you some of the experiences they've had in your ceremonies?
Great question. Absolutely. I think I zone out sometimes where it all comes to me and then I kind of forget. So let me take in my memory. But of course, there have been both in person and online. And I think it's kind of nice to touch on that for a moment as well. I will always be more connected, I feel, when I'm in a room with people face to face. Always, because I can make sure that like I clean a room physically and also spiritually before I set up an altar. And it's really my little baby. Like I make such a beautiful space out of it so that people can really land. And it's important for that to be the case, so that it's a sacred space. It's not just a gym and I put down a mat for you and here's your cacao. No, it's actually very mindfully, very intentionally prepared, from making the cacao to holding that space so that people can really feel safe. And of course, when I do it online, I send everybody all the instructions beforehand, and everybody will make their own little sacred nest at home. And we can equally profoundly connect with the medicine online as well. And what are some things that people experienced? Yeah, like I remember one friend of mine who was in a ceremony with me in Phnom Penh. She just felt a lot of fire energy. She just really wanted to get up and dance and really embrace this kind of like goddess energy that kind of surfaced in her body. So very, like a physical experience of expression of creativity. That's something that cacao really can surface as well, whether it's in dance or singing or poetry or art. So you can really combine it, not just with sitting in a space and sharing space with each other. You can combine it with yoga. You can combine it with so many different things, because it really, helps you tap into that childlike energy again as well. One of the girls that was in that same ceremony, she emailed me months later, maybe even a year later at this point, where she's like, Kim, that was just so profound for me. She was going through a breakup and was really going through emotional moments in her life. And the fact that this medicine can really hold a person and give you that space to almost like break down, but in a good way, to open up, to break open your heart and just to let things be and cry and let it out. Like that's, I'm like, somebody cried again. My ceremony was successful, because crying is just something that we also have been kind of lost touch with sometimes. Well, as women, I think for us it may be easier. Like I cry all the time. For men, it may be a little bit less. And even more so in a group setting, people be like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to just sit there crying my eyes out? Well, if that's what you need, and in that sacred space, in that safe space, I myself am there to hold that space for people. Mm-hmm. And to be there with Reiki or with sound or with, smudging, like other sacred plants or whatever I intuitively come up with in that moment to help that person. So see, it's kind of like a session with a psychologist. It's like therapy almost, but in a different way, where you are the person in charge always. Like I will never say, oh, the medicine is going to heal this for you. No, the medicine opens up a pathway for you to tap into your own intuition, your own healing powers, your own strength, to be courageous and to face the things that may surface. And it can also be a very beautiful and positive and blissful experience. I think that's important to mention as well. It's not just going into unresolved issues, let's say. It can also be really empowering. And one of the elements of a ceremony is to set an intention at the start, or even as you might have signed up for a ceremony. I always invite people to start letting those juices kind of start running through the system. I feel like what would help me most? What would I like to invite into my life? What is my biggest wish right now? That I can speak into my cacao. So I will literally invite people to hold their cup and speak it or whisper it or blow it into the cup so it alchemizes into the water molecules. And we then drink that, and basically the vessel of the water transports that intention into our whole being. And if you believe in law of attraction and so forth, energy frequencies, etc., I see that the cacao, and you can do this with a cup of water, by the way, it doesn't need to be cacao, however, I feel cacao gives it like an extra boost. That intention can then manifest itself even more strongly out into your life. And that is just so beautiful.
Well, the fact that you say intention, that word right there is so powerful, because so many of us are on a treadmill of just going through the motions to do the things we got to do, and stopping and really being intentional about, is the path I'm on really the one I think I should still be on? Like, do I need to make a shift, even a small one in one particular area? Is there a conversation I need to have with someone? Is there something unresolved in my spirit that I've not dealt with? Is there emotion I've not allowed to release? And you were talking about the power of tears. And really, even from in my study of women's hormonal health, we get more weepy typically the last 2 weeks of our cycle before our menstrual phase starts. And that's called the luteal phase. And we get more weepy. But the beauty of tears release estrogen, excess estrogen in our body, which is what we need to happen so we can have an easier time of our cycle. So there's a purpose to it. And then that leads us into the time in our cycle where our intuition is at its highest, is during the bleeding phase. So it's like nothing is wasted. Nothing is for no reason. Whereas many women, because we've been trying to live kind of disconnected from our bodies and from really our inner desires, just to go through life and get it done, we've disconnected. And so we've missed so many of the gifts because we've been looking at it as a big inconvenience, when really there's so much power, that goddess energy you were talking about, right? There's so much power to what we experience as women, even though it's not always comfortable. Being able to go through that makes us more connected to who we are meant to be, the path we're meant to be on, that we can then later on more easily release things. Like, I'm noticing this just as I go through my life, entering towards the wisdom years, really having that intuition. So having ceremony and inviting these circles and being with other women going through this process is so, so beautiful and powerful and needed. And that's why it's wonderful to see more of it happening. And so, details here about cacao. During the ceremony, is it warm cacao?
Typically, yes. So how the Mayans and Aztecs would typically prepare it is with water. So you get the cacao, which is made into a paste, and you will take a certain amount of grams. I kind of go between 30 to 40 grams for a ceremonial dose, which is a bit stronger than I would take usually on my day-to-day, for example. And that is put in a pot or whichever utensil you have available to yourself, preferably on fire, like actual fire. Well, a wooded fire out in the forest, like that would be the dream, of course, like close to the elements. However, I cook it on my fire stove, and I will add a little bit of cinnamon, typically, a bit of cayenne pepper, or a bit of chili, fresh chili, because that opens up the veins even more, so your body's more receptive to the medicine. You can add some cardamom, and personally, I like to add a little pinch of salt to it as well. Mm-hmm. I don't sweeten it anymore because I've gotten so used to the kind of like bitter taste. Well, it depends on the bean. It depends on where the cacao comes from. It's like coffee. Every region, every produce will be different, every harvest. Yeah. So that's important to know. But sometimes you can add some honey or a bit of maple syrup or agave syrup or whatever you like. I don't like to use refined sugar, for example. And you brew that up before boiling point. So you just kind of like heat it up so that the cacao melts beautifully into your water. And then you drink it. Well, then you set your intention and all the space setting and so forth. For my day to day, I like to make mine with some oat milk, no dairy, because the dairy kind of works counter intuitive in the body.
Yeah.
Also, what's recommended before you have cacao to not eat or have a very light meal so that your body is open, preferably no caffeine, because then you're like going totally through the roof. No dairy products. And there's like a few little bits and pieces that I usually recommend people that come sit in ceremony with me to do to prepare themselves. But yeah, you drink it hot. However, there's also like you can make your iced cacao if it's really hot in summer. Mm-hmm. But I've typically actually made my cacao warm because it just feels good. It's a nice little treat for the body as well.
Oh, yeah. There's so much to it. The way we nourish our bodies allows us to go about our day, to do the things that we've planned with more connection to ourselves. Because I've noticed even just something simple like, say, you skip a meal and you grab something on the go to go out into the world, you feel differently. You don't maybe feel as grounded. So having some kind of ritual in the morning, which I think is one of the bases of the self-care practices that I guide people into also. It's having some kind of ritual, a ritual that works for you, a ritual that is yours. And this is so beautiful. I love that you've shared so much about this because I've been curious to hear the background story of it. And it's so beautiful. Now that you've added this into the work that you're doing with people, and some of the programs and things that you have now on, I would love for you to talk about that. But before you do, what are you finding the women you're working with are dealing with right now? A commonality of a block that is coming up? Because I feel like anytime I talk to someone who does something similar to what you do, it's interesting how it does transfer into different fields.
The word that comes up to me is empowerment, actually. So stepping into our power as women, I feel, is a big kind of theme. And that can have all kinds of underlying causes, let's say. For some people, it may be, going through a loved one that has passed, which has caused them to, just be off the tracks for a while. For somebody else, it may be their confidence or not knowing exactly what their purpose is. Ultimately, I feel like, well, that's the clear kind of guidance that came through for me. Ultimately, it's about empowerment, this embodiment of our power as women and standing our ground and actually showing up for the beautiful, powerful beings, divine beings that we are. So in some shape or form, that usually it comes back to that, opening up to our emotions, as we were saying, really allowing the softness and the vulnerability and our intuitiveness to come to the surface as well, because that's, for me at least, that's one of the huge parts of the divine feminine, to give ourselves, to come from that void energy, that goddess energy, really that creation, and allowing ourselves to follow the sparks or the universal breadcrumbs, as I often call them, to not just live by so-called societal standards, which I have thrown out of the window, especially after having left my corporate job and gone through this whole almost 2 years now of travel and rediscovering myself. So I feel empowerment is a big word there.
As you say that, I think about how for so many generations, it hasn't felt safe for women to be powerful. Is there a mold that can be created that you can be in where you actually feel safe? And I don't think the answer is yes. I think we just have to follow what it is we feel we're meant to be doing. And the beautiful thing is right now, I'm seeing more women who are rising to that and rising in that. So it's beautiful to witness. It's beautiful to be a part of. It's something I also want to encourage my women listeners and the women in my life to be able to tap into that part of themselves, because the more we do, I feel that does ground us in our purpose, and the more the world is bettered by it,
Mm.
because there's just so much beauty in having a more aligned balance between the male and female, because we definitely need both. We need both in society. We need both within ourselves, right? The structure of the masculine and all the other energetics of the feminine. For sure, we need both. It's neat to see. I've been following along a number of people's work in this area, and I feel like the divine feminine is really being released. I'll be interested to look back a decade from now at this time. A really different world is emerging as a result of it. There's so many different beautiful ways it can go. I would love to know what you are working on right now, what you are planning for the new year, any offerings or things that we can share so people can work with you.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like I'm very much in creation mode. So I started working with different plant medicines as well as I arrived back in the Netherlands. So I feel like I've gone through lots of different waves of insight and integration of going into plant medicine ceremonies again this weekend.
Great.
Which I feel comes at a perfect time with all that's going on globally and with what you were saying earlier. I also go through those moments of disempowerment, like, oh, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to be doing here? Which may not seem like it on the outside, but I assure you, I have my moments where I'm like, what? I'm just going to go off and live on the Pleiades, guys. I'm done. Like, I literally joke with some of my friends, like, we're done. We're just going to go hit the stars and see you later. So I've been asked by a friend to set up my own cacao journey so that I can support people to get to know the cacao spirit, work with cacao for themselves and potentially for others as well. So I started actually putting together some things a couple of days ago. So that's like really very new. To be honest, like I haven't got specific things planned as such. As I step more into the divine feminine, it's very much more in flow.
I love that.
Like I've moved away from the masculine. Oh my God, March is for this, May is for that. Like it just doesn't work with me anymore, especially with all this plant medicine work that I'm doing. I may have months, like I've had months where I didn't do anything like the whole month.
Mm-hmm.
And from a business perspective, you're like, oh my God, what am I doing? But from a human perspective, from a divine soul perspective, it's exactly what I need. And that's something I always keep saying to myself, is all unfolding divinely. So I may relaunch my Global Intuitive Goddesses again. So I hosted a beautiful online container twice already with cacao ceremonies, with women's circles, with guest speakers. And both times were just so magical, where it's incredible how the perfect amount and the perfect type of women, not that it's one type, but the perfect women for that group, for each group, just came together so magically and really supporting them in, stepping into their power, sharing spiritual practices, sharing a bunch of wisdom that I've kind of remembered or have learned over the past years as I've stepped onto my spiritual path. And what else? Yeah, one-to-one, people can still work with me, of course. But for the rest, like big things, I would love to set up a course, have some type of passive income, because everything that I'm doing really is either group or one-to-one. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to have that little tweak. It really suits myself as a manifestor from a human design perspective as well. But yeah, that's something that will come. And something else was popping in my mind. Yeah, ceremonies. I will continue hosting ceremonies. I'd love to host retreats. 1 day, 2 day, however many days retreats, because I feel I have so much to share, and a ceremony is beautiful, and it's like a boost And being together for 1 or 2 or multiple days can really, shake up so many things and anchor you into your being. So, well, I have lots of dreams. I mean, like
Yeah.
all over the world, different locations. But let's see how the world develops over the next couple of months. But those are a few of the things that I have in my, well, pipeline sounds very masculine, but in my creative box, let's say.
Oh, I love it. It's so fun to be in that space of creating. And there are those distinctive phases that you go through. I love that you are engaging more with the flow of where you're being led. It's like you're following what your spirit is having you do. There's a depth to that. Obviously, the things you've got set up already with your one-to-one, with also the Akashic readings and those types of things, also connecting with the leadership coaching and all of that. There's always a need for that, and people connected with you who are wanting to grow and scale their lives, their businesses, et cetera, but doing it more intentionally and soulfully. It's just such a beautiful combination that you've put together there. Well, I love it. And so I'm going to link people to your website and to your Instagram so that people can see what's coming up on your calendar and they can participate. This has been so wonderful. I'm so happy to connect with you again. Love following your work. And thanks for going so deep into the plant medicine of cacao. It's so wonderful to hear the depth of what it can offer people. So thank you for that.
You're so welcome. Yeah, it's something that I've become very passionate about, and I wish to share this with everyone. So if anybody has any questions, just drop me an email or a DM. Happy to share a bit more, and maybe that might inspire me as well in terms of, okay, what are people wishing to learn? And thank you for starting this podcast, for keeping it going. I mean, that also needs to be said. So thank you for sharing your voice and helping others share theirs. So forever grateful.
Well, I'm grateful for you. Thank you for being here. And to our listeners, thanks for listening. I'm sure that so many things have come up as you have listened. I would love to know what resonated the most for you. And if you want to let Kim and I know, there's a way to reach us in the show notes. We would love to hear. And we will see you next time. Big blessings.
Thank you so much for being here with me on the Connect podcast. If you like this episode, please share it with someone you think would enjoy it. Also, if you head over to iTunes to leave a review, I'd be so grateful. Let us know what your favorite parts were and what you'd like to hear more of. It will help us have a greater impact, elevating many more people to grow and succeed together. See you next time.